welcome to Three Inning Fan, the podcast. I'm Kelley Franco, your host. My guest is Liz Benn, and this is a woman who knows her way around a baseball front office because she's a former baseball executive. Liz was the director of Major League Operations for the Mets, becoming the organization's highest ranking woman in baseball operations in its history. And prior to working with the Mets, she worked at MLB in baseball ops and player development, including establishing the girls' baseball development infrastructure. I've gotten to know Liz more recently through her work on Baseball Night in New York on SNY. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. Now, I have to say, I first met you, if I could say met you, doing your gigs as a baseball analyst on Baseball Night in New York on SNY. And folks, if you're not watching that, you need to be watching it. It's on every night at 6, and I record it every night, and then I watch it while I shovel food into my mouth, which is very American, I think. And so Liz has been on this show since about June. And Liz, during the course of this show, we can really see your insights coming through and feel your background as a baseball executive. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got the gig?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was at the Mets, I think just based on my personality, I'm a friendly Canadian. We're nice to everybody. We get along with everybody. So I ended up becoming friends with a lot of the media members. And when I kind of saw that the Mets' time was kind of coming to a close, I thought a little bit about, and a few of those people brought up to me like, okay, well, think about doing TV at some point. And I'm like, that's never gonna happen. That's not my real personality. Like, I can't do that. But the more I got into the baseball season, I missed it a lot. I missed doing kind of analysis and breakdowns of players and roster moves and things like that. So I reached out to Gary Apple from SNY, who's just an absolutely wonderful person. Him and I have become friends over the last couple years, and he was just like, "Let me talk to the producers here. They'd love to have you on." So started doing that. It's very much not in my comfort zone or not in my nature to do that. And honestly, too, just the shift in the way that you talk about baseball from in a front office to TV is different. And so I think I'm still kind of adapting to that. I think one with the information that you're using, but also the way that you present it. So I'm getting used to it, but it's been a lot of fun. And all the reporters and analysts that I'm on with, I mean, they're incredible people. I'm learning a lot from them. I'm learning about the production side. So I've absolutely loved that experience.
And I do have to say, I really like everybody on the show. I think that it's a tremendous group. But I think that your background as a baseball executive is really kind of giving you your own voice in the show. But I'm really curious about something you just said. You said you have to present the information a little differently on TV than you would when you were actually in the front office. Do you have to play a little more nicey nice?
Yeah, I think in the front office, you're coming up with ideas and you're throwing them out, and in some cases you have the whole background of okay, we want to extend this player or we want to pick up the option, and you have an entire analysis. It's very detail oriented. One that would be really boring on TV to look at, but then two, I think in other cases, when you're having discussions, you kind of throw something out quickly. And there's a lot of background that the people in the room already know about. They kind of know all the implications and the surrounding circumstances that would kind of bring you to say something like that. With TV, it's like you need to provide that yourself. And it's high level analysis, and the viewers, they know baseball really well. Mets fans know baseball very, very well. But you still need to just adjust the message a little bit. So even a challenge that I'm finding that I'm having quite a bit is when it is, when they ask me to analyze a trade proposal or something, I go through my normal kind of front office process, and that's just way too much information. So for me, a big challenge is kind of reducing that to something that is informative, but also accessible on TV.
Right. You would probably easily wind up talking for the full 30 minutes and they'd be like, we're never having her back on again.
Exactly. Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that content.
So, as the head of baseball ops for the Mets, can you tell me just a little bit what that role was about and what it entailed?
Yeah, it's I feel like, almost 4 years later since starting it, it's still really hard to actually summarize. So I would say that the core of it is managing the major league roster. And so that sounds like a broad statement. That's because it is. It's because that has to do with, I would write all the contracts for the players. I would do all the transactions. Sometimes I would have to call a player and tell him he's DFA'd. I would monitor the ILs every day and where guys are with their rehab. There was a lot of strategy, of course, involved, especially, trade deadline is fresh on my mind, and that was kind of my favorite part and most involved part of the year. But it's also setting up spring training. It's seeing what the coaching staff needs. When Buck was the manager, Buck Schulter's the manager, I was in his office almost every day after the game, kind of strategizing on the moves for the next day. It's checking in with the kitchen staff. So anything that could touch the major league players or coaching staff, I would have some kind of role in. But I would say the core of it was that major league roster management.
Wow, that is a pretty broad job description. So, you said something really interesting, and that was that you would have to call players to tell them they were DFA'd sometimes. What would that conversation go like?
So a lot of players, after you say you've been DFA'd or you've been traded or you've been released, any of that stuff, they don't really hear anything after that. So it's generally a pretty quick conversation. But I think that something that I was good at, I think, was establishing relationships with the players. Obviously very professional relationships, but when they were in the minors and the majors. So, I wasn't kind of a blank front office person doing those calls. I was somebody that they knew. And so some of them actually would ask questions. A lot of them did not, but it's just kind of telling them like, hey, based on the roster constraints right now, we have to make a spot. Unfortunately, you're the person coming off the roster, so we're going to DFA you. And then there's kind of like the whole timeline that we explain to them of what they can do for the next 5 to 7 days. Again, some of them might call you after. You'll always talk to their agent as well. They're not fun conversations to have. I hate making those calls, but you have to do it dozens of times during a year.
So, the first call is to the player, not the agent.
It depends kind of on the relationship too, or like, what that agent prefers to. Also, if the player is at the park, the manager and general manager, or president will do the conversation in person. But say it's somebody who's in AAA. If it's a player who I knew, I'd generally call them or call the agent first. It's very quick. It's like one right after the other.
And you said you had the opportunity to kind of develop a relationship so you weren't just a name, but you were a face that they knew. How do you do that in when you're in the front office?
Yeah, so I think I kind of had an easy path into doing that because I was the main person who was talking to all the players going into spring training to figure out what day they're arriving, are they staying in the hotel or off site. So, I was the first person talking to a lot of them for that season. And so then they would come to me with a lot of questions, or, one of them said, can you make sure that there's a bathtub in the hotel room because I have a newborn and we need to give the baby baths. So, you're answering those questions. And then I would make sure that whenever they arrived at spring training, I just introduced myself so they actually saw who I was. Um, so, through that, and then I was also the person who would sign all the contracts with them. So, the pre-arbitration guys, that's all done at spring training. Arbitration is done a little before. So, just having those regular kind of meeting points with them, you become a familiar face. But then, you're around them so much, you do develop, you'll shoot the shit a little bit at times, or you'll, talk about a game, or if they see you watching a bullpen on a backfield or something, or a live AB on a backfield, they might ask you for some feedback after. So I think it's just kind of being around, being present, and being available to them. That's what established the relationships. And then, the more you see them, you know, the the more you can kind of chit chat as well.
And I'm gonna get to that topic that you just said of feedback when they're throwing a side session because you've got special insight on that. But first, I have like a little curiosity about just kind of what the front office looks like. And those of us who haven't been in a front office, can you tell us, are the desks set up like all in an open area, like a bullpen, or is it private offices? Is it at City Field, or is it in some office building? Just tell me what it's like.
Yeah, for the Mets, it's at City Field. So if you kind of look in center field, you see this big brick building. We're in there, where we were in there. So there are some offices, but a lot of it is kind of an open layout. I was kind of in a corner, and there were, the AGM and another director were kind of next to me in this kind of three-person workspace. So it's pretty open, and I really like that too because it allows for more open conversation. I know a lot of stadiums, their front offices are divided very much kind of like office, 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 and I just don't think that that allows for as much collaboration. So very open. But yeah, we all have our desks. Um, yeah, it was a great setup.
Yeah, also, I think that the open floor plan gives a feeling of equality to it, like you're all in it together.
Definitely. And it allows for more crossover between the different kind of sub departments too. So where I was sitting was kind of in a corner, but to the side of me was the pro player personnel group. And so they're ones who are managing the pro scouting, but also some of the deeper digging, not fully analytics based, but somewhat analytics based in player scouting and, understanding other teams' roster needs and stuff like that. So I could hear them. Behind me was a couple people from amateur scouting. So I, got to learn a bit about the draft. But then, a few steps away is analytics and sports science and performance and all those people. So yeah, you get to learn about a lot of different areas. And that's something that I loved about my role too, is that I was a baseball ops generalist. I wasn't specialized in any specific area. And so I did get to learn from all those different areas, which helped my skill set as well.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing because what an opportunity to learn so many new things. Now, you mentioned the analytics guys and gals, and so that's what I think of when I think of front offices. I think of the quants. But what I like that you just said is that they're also the scouts there. So do they like work together? Do they have separate departments and then collaborate?
I think there's this whole broad public narrative of like, oh, analytics versus old school baseball, like it's completely divided. It's not. Maybe in some places it is, but at the Mets it definitely was not. There's a lot of collaboration there. Everybody uses information from other departments. So every baseball operations department has an internal system where you can access kind of the different departments' information and kind of work results too, and kind of use that as you please. So there's a lot of collaboration. It's not as kind of hard divided as people make it seem. And again, maybe at other organizations it is, but at the Mets it definitely was not.
Ah, that's really interesting to hear. So I am just kind of wondering, you said you worked every night with Showalter, you'd go into his office after games every night. Was it the kind of job where you slept with the phone next to your head? Was there work 24/7 or was that only like at the trade deadline?
Yeah, my phone was always on. I had the Billy Epler and Buck Showalter's calls would get, bypass the do not disturb and everything. So, you're always available because you don't know when something's going to come up, whether that's a player transaction, an injury, something like that. Obviously the off season too gets a little crazy with free agency because those deals could get done at any time of the day, and then you need to kind of set up, the different like contingent agreements and stuff before the physicals, and then coordinate with the medical staff and get the physicals done. So the phone is always on. So I think this year that I'm not in it, it's a little weird for me that if I put my phone on do not disturb, nobody's going to disturb me. It's crazy. It's wild.
Yeah, what a luxury.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was down at the winter meetings last year when the Juan Soto signing broke, and it was kind of like it was probably about 10:30 at night. I mean, it wasn't like the middle of the night, but it wasn't, 8:30 either. It was kind of late enough that a lot of us had gone up to our rooms, and then all of a sudden it comes down and it's just like forget everything, go back,
Well,
clothes back on and go downstairs.
that specific one was fun too because I mentioned I've become friends with a lot of media members. So finally, me and Anthony DeComo, everybody's favorite Mets writer, we were finally gonna catch up. We went across the street to get a burger. The second the food came, the news broke, and he's like, "See ya!" And so he runs over to the SNY booth, and so I ended up standing there and kind of bringing him his takeaway burger. And I was like, "Well, maybe someday we'll catch up, but that won't be today." So it does kind of disturb your social life a little bit too. I mean, winter meetings is winter meetings, but like there were times where, another friend of mine, Michelle Margot, from SNY. So I remember once I was at, brunch with her and her husband, and it was lovely. And I was like, oh, a Sunday morning away. This is great. And then we signed a player to a minor league deal. And then a member of the coaching staff called me and he's like, hey, I need a full review. And I just remember kind of standing outside in the snow in New York, kind of giving a full scouting report of this player we just signed. So it's a little 24/7.
That's the way it is sometimes. So I have like a question that's just kind of like a little nosy curiosity question here. So I read in prepping for this interview that you grew up a Yankee fan. Is that correct?
Did, yes.
Okay. And so when you interviewed with the Mets, like, did they ask, like, hey, by the way, who do you
So
personally want to win?
First so I first worked at the commissioner's office, and in the commissioner's office, you can't have a favorite team. You're serving all of them equally. So, there might be like a little something like deep down that, gets exciting. But I actually did like the Mets a lot growing up too. I'm from Toronto, and so that New York rivalry wasn't as big in my mind. But, David Wright was a player who I absolutely loved growing up, my Piazza. So I liked the Mets too. But, once you work in baseball, I think the fandom for better or for worse, kind of dissolved a little bit. I think this year, I can see the excitement of the Blue Jays kind of making a run for it, because again, that was my childhood team, even if I was a Yankee fan. So I can kind of watch that and get a little excited. But once you work in baseball, the fandom kind of dissolves a little bit.
I can feel that myself just through years of being a baseball fan. Different things bring it about. But one thing I love about the Mets is they have such good booths. Their radio and TV booths are so good that I find that I just love watching them on TV because I always learn something new from their booths.
Absolutely. And even like the radio guys. So, those guys are some of my favorite people too. And I mean, there were times last year where if the team's away and I'm not with the team, I'd go for a run and I'm like, oh shoot, the game's starting now. And I would kind of listen to the radio on my way back home to watch. And I was like, these guys are so good. Like they're
They're
so
so
good.
good.
So
They're so good. They paint the most beautiful picture. And, sometimes my favorite part of a game is just when I decide, you know what, I'm going to listen to the last couple innings in bed as I doze off to sleep and just kind of falling asleep to those voices is the sound of summer to me.
absolutely. I'm with you there.
So, even though you're not in ops anymore, it sounds like your experience was just so kind of all encompassing that I'm wondering if when you watch a baseball game now, does it look different to you? And like once I went to law school, I was like, that's it. I can't think like a normal person anymore. My day basically consists of observing potential tort liabilities and eating and watching baseball. That's all I do.
Yep.
Since you were in baseball ops, is the romance gone?
And I think the romance isn't gone. So something that we also always say is, we have all the analytics, we have all the projections and stuff, but you still play the baseball games. And that's why it's not determined at the preseason projections. And so things are going to go one way or another. And so that's why you watch baseball. So the romance is not gone. I do think that I watch it differently. At the start of the season, when I tried to watch, I had to take a break actually because the only thing on my mind was roster moves and what the bullpen looks like and who's available in AAA. And I was like, this isn't my problem anymore. I don't have to pay attention to this. I don't have to do pitch counts. I don't have to do, how many ups does this guy have at the start of the season after his injury he came off of last year. So I needed to kind of train myself off of that. But once I took a break, and I think also doing SNY helped a little bit with this too, is just watching the quality of the individual game and what the individual performance looks like. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to just kind of like casually, passively watch a baseball game again. I don't think that my brain's going to allow me to. So I'm looking at the details of, plate approach, defensive positioning, who's covering where, who is the next pitcher available, but it's not as intense anymore as the last 3 years and then the start of the season when I needed to really reality check myself.
What I'm hearing is that you almost had to go through a little detox for yourself.
Absolutely. It was definitely a detox.
You referenced before that you were pretty hands-on with the Mets players and that you might find yourself in the bullpen. And I'd like to tell our listeners that one of the many things that's so cool about Liz Benn is that she plays baseball. And I don't mean softball. I mean, she actually plays baseball. So Liz, can you tell us a little bit about playing baseball?
Definitely. So I grew up playing baseball. I'm from Toronto and there wasn't softball in the area and my older brother played baseball and so it was just like, yeah, if you want to play, go ahead, play baseball. So I was the only girl in the league pretty much my whole life. Um I have had a couple shoulder injuries, but I still get to play now, and it's a men's league mostly in the Bronx, the New York City Metro Baseball League, and it's just been so much fun to keep playing. And it's competitive, but it's obviously not serious. So, I get that level of competition. I get to kind of like try out different pitch sequencing and stuff, which helps me with my job in turn. But also, I realized very quickly that once some of the players and coaching staff found out that I play baseball, even if it's not at a professional level, even if it's not, college or anything, they respect me so much more. And they kind of bought into me being around more. So, the coaches coach. I am not trying to be a coach. I was never trying to do that. But when I was watching and then a guy, yeah, like mostly at spring training, if I was watching and then a guy saw me watching, he might come over to me afterwards and, ask like, hey, how did like the slider look coming off of the, I don't know, cutter or something. So you could have those conversations, or some of them would, feel something off with their mechanics. And, a couple times throughout the 3 years, they would ask me, hey, can you look at this video with me and see if you notice anything different? And again, there's the whole coaching staff, the whole on-field strategy staff that's really doing that work. But I think because they know that I've played and I've kind of been that position before, again, at a way lower level, they trusted kind of my eyes or wanted me to see kind of what I was seeing with them in case it was a little bit different from what somebody else was. So it just gave me a lot of credibility, which I think helped me, do my job effectively and also be there for them in multiple ways for both the players and coaches.
Yeah, and it also kind of chips away at this narrative that, people in the front office don't know the game. You know the game.
I think that helps too. I remember one of them at one point, he found out that I played and he was so excited about it. He was kind of just called up from AAA, and another guy was also just called up from AAA. And the two of them were sitting there. We were in some away town and having lunch, and they sat at my table because they were kind of nervous. They didn't know anybody on the big league team yet. It was very sweet actually. So they're like, "Hey, can we sit with you?" And I was like, "Sure." And they were just like, "You're so much like us. Like not exactly, but you're so much like us." And just hearing that from them, having this little conversation about how like, no, like she gets it, that was kind of nice to hear that, they're able to kind of quickly develop this level of trust with me that may not exist with somebody who hasn't played baseball kind of at the adult level or past kind of youth baseball before.
Sure. And not only that you understand the substance, what goes into a good four seamer or the cutter or the slider, but you understand what it's like to be the person standing on the mound and having everybody, all the players and the fans and everyone look at you.
Yeah, and I think they also understand the challenge that goes along with being the only like girl on the field. There's obviously a lot of pressure there. So, if I'm not playing in front of thousands of people or even hundreds of people, but I do have that added pressure. And I think that some of them kind of understood that subtle difference and how there is kind of added pressure that I work through. I mean, I've even had minor league players from this year from various organizations kind of reach out to me who I've gotten to know the last 2 years and ask me about kind of like mental performance and kind of how to kind of train yourself mentally. And I'm not, again, I'm not overstepping. I'm telling them to mostly like take notes in a journal or something. But because they see that I've kind of been in those different situations, I think that they feel comfortable going to me for just a different perspective at times.
That's really nice. I'm really happy to hear about, that aspect of what being a female brings to the game. It's a whole different component that, well, it's unique.
Yeah, I think they sometimes, some of them sometimes feel more comfortable around you. Maybe they're raised by a single mother or they have a bunch of sisters or something, so you're just kind of naturally a bit more of a approachable presence. I mean, some of them would share, frustrations with injuries and stuff, and I don't know if they would necessarily do that with a male counterpart.
Sure. Sure. So, like I said, I've been watching you on Baseball Night in New York and love your insights. And then I kind of we followed each other on Twitter, and I noticed that you had like some really cool, surprising dimensions about you. And that's what made me want to get to know you. And the big thing is you have your master's in philosophy and you teach philosophy.
I do. I do.
Okay, yes. So, listeners, she has her master's from Columbia in philosophy. So, I gotta say, I don't know a lot about philosophy. I took the requirements when I was in college, but what drew you to study it?
Yeah, it was never what I thought I would do, but I think when I was actually in high school, I had a philosophy class in grade 12 and it was wonderful. So I figured, okay, I'll take a couple electives in college and see what happens. But I absolutely loved it. I think one, just the way that you kind of think through problems, the types of problems you think through, but also what's cool about philosophy is that you could touch a lot of different areas within the discipline. So like during my master's, I really focused a lot on social political philosophy, but also philosophy of art. So I was able to kind of do two drastically different topics within the same discipline, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, it's always funny when people ask me, "Oh, what should I like study in school to get into baseball?" I'm just like, I don't really know how to answer that for you because I did two philosophy degrees and it worked out for me. But like, is that the path I'd recommend? Probably not. But I don't, it worked out. It worked great. So yeah, philosophy teaches you how to think and how to write. So I think again, it kind of gave me those soft skills that are really important for any professional job. But um, yeah, I think in baseball too, specifically, I mean, you have to be able to argue from both sides. And so being in the trade deadline room or negotiating a free agency contract or an arbitration deal or something, being able to see both sides really clearly is very helpful. And I'll credit philosophy with that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So it's like you learn how to think and then you can really apply those reasoning skills to analyzing the contracts or the negotiation, or comparing two different players to see which is the better fit for your team. So that's fascinating to think about philosophy, like playing that role in like the paperwork side of baseball and the scouting side of baseball. But what about in the game on the field? I mean, does philosophy have a role in baseball?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think if you look at it in kind of like a meta way, definitely. I mean, a professor who I was very close with in undergrad who, wrote on my letters of recommendation to get into grad school. He was a huge baseball guy, Mark Kingwell, and he wrote a book called Fail Better: Why Baseball Matters. And so, the amount of failure in baseball, maybe you want to expand that to a different, area of life or something. So there's that. I also think, I'm so focused on aesthetics and philosophy of art. There's kind of like an aesthetics and like a natural flow to sports that I think is interesting. And I haven't really dove super deep into that, but it's been on my mind for years of just, the aesthetics of baseball. And so yeah, I think definitely. In the moment I don't want to philosophize too much about whether I'm throwing a slider or a slurve, but I think the broader topics are really fun to talk about or think about.
Well, so you mentioned the aesthetic, and I do recall from my requirements that I fulfilled that there was this concept of the aesthetic in philosophy, and it's been a few years. So, can you just explain that to me, but explain it to me like I'm a Labrador retriever?
Amazing. So there's, oh my gosh. Okay, so this is my favorite part of philosophy is the aesthetics. There's a lot of different topics within aesthetics and philosophy. There's stuff like, if you go back to Plato, it's kind of about like beauty and also deception and things like that. The paper that I wrote to get into Columbia was essentially why can I put a coffee cup on the floor of MoMA and you see it as art and not a coffee cup? And what is the epistemological change there that changes it from a regular coffee cup to an artwork, or something that can be seen as art? And also what are kind of the implications of that. So that's kind of contemporary aesthetics a little more, but there is discussion about Burke talks about the kind of like the vastness and like nature and stuff. So like that falls into aesthetics. But if there's somewhere to start, it's really with Plato and kind of deception, and the theory of forms is very much related to aesthetics. I can't believe I'm talking about this on a baseball podcast. This is great. This is so much fun
Well,
for me.
and we should have told our listeners to drop acid. So if you're
Exactly.
playing at home, drop some acid now, and we'll just get into this philosophy thing. So, what would it be about baseball that if we had to say, Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, we'll call them like the murderer's row of philosophy. What would they like about baseball? Would they like Willie Mays? Would they like Satchel Paige? Would they like the Savannah Bananas?
That's a great question. I think one thing that I think about is so Plato is very much kind of like aesthetics within a social context. And so I think that when you watch baseball, there's a natural flow and everybody has their role and knows exactly what their role is. So I think that he'd be pretty happy with it and how those roles kind of fit together to kind of create a broader goal of winning and stuff. So I think kind of that natural flow fits into the aesthetics, but also kind of that social cooperation that leads to, Plato's ideal society. So, baseball leads to Plato's ideal society. We'll just quote that and that'll, be what I'm known for spewing on the internet now.
Well, I feel like if there's baseball excellence and there's beauty in that, and that should maybe be kind of an aesthetic that they would appreciate.
I'm with you there. I like it. Maybe we should write something about this.
Okay, sounds good. So, if there's a place for philosophy in baseball, is there a place for baseball in philosophy? Like, do you ever talk about it in your classes?
I did a lot with Mark Kingwell in undergrad, and I think as he was kind of writing that book and Fail Better and stuff. So I think the failure is a big part of it. I think that fits into it. Also, if you go to like a Wittgenstein or somebody, there's a lot of discussion of like family resemblance and sports and how they kind of, there are rules to them. And we know that they're all sports, but the rules are different and things like that. So yeah, but sports and baseball kind of have a role there in understanding kind of how the brain works to understand different concepts.
All right. Well, I'm super excited that I was able to like throw in a Socrates and a Plato. Um, I was thinking when I was preparing about my one of my favorite quotes from Bart Giamatti, and I'm fond of it every year when my team gets eliminated in the playoffs or at the end of the season.
Sorry about
He
that.
said, yeah, he said, baseball will break your heart. It's designed to break your heart.
Yep.
And that always leaves me feeling like a little philosophical. And I don't know if that's the human condition or is that just a twisted thing that we subject ourselves to.
Yeah, I mean, only one team can win, and I've always thought too, once your team wins, like, then what? Because, from a front office standpoint, the World Series ends, and then a couple days later, you're at GM meetings, and it's the deadline to, submit your reserve list and stuff. So, like, you're already looking at the next year. So I just wonder how I would feel in that experience of, you're winning, and like that's amazing, but also immediately you're looking at the next year. So that's something I'm looking forward to experiencing someday. Obviously, to win and get a ring and everything, but how will that experience feel?
Wow, I had never really thought about that. You win and then what? There you go, folks. It's even more philosophy in baseball. So, that's just amazing. I love the fact that you have that other side to you. And I love when people surprise me. When you think, like, oh, I'm seeing that dimension and that's Liz Ben. But then it turns out there's just a whole nother Liz Ben. So, thanks so much for sharing that part of you with us.
Of course. I think it's also just so important to not fully attach yourself to one thing. If we dive into this a bit more too, it's like, a lot of athletes or baseball players, when they're finished playing, typically it's not their choice. For the most part, it's not their choice. And then their whole identity has been wrapped up in just baseball for their entire lives. And that transition out is really, really tough for most people. So I think, generally just having more dimensions and more interest and stuff makes life and the life transitions easier too.
For sure. Yeah, for all of us. Now, okay, well, we have even more important topics to approach here. Actually, just one more, because here at the Three Inning Fan Show, we close every show with food, which is basically all I think about besides baseball.
Same.
Um, so our question to close our show is what's good to eat while watching the ball game? And so, Liz Ben, it can be while you're at home on your couch in quiet silence and meditation, or it can be while you're at the ballpark. But Liz Ben, what's good to eat while watching the ball game?
Okay, I can't narrow it down because I have two answers because there's two different ways of watching the baseball game. So when I was at the stadium every single day, there is so much stress and it's every single pitch, and so you need volume food. And so in that case it was popcorn. There was popcorn in the box every day. It was always there. I would just down popcorn the whole time because it was something to do with my hands and to distract myself while I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the game and what we're doing after. So popcorn, which is an easy boring answer, but it was my reality for 3 years. The other answer, so my mom and I watched a ton of games growing up. My dad could not care less about sports. My mom, a huge baseball fan, and why I was raised a Yankee fan. We would eat chocolate-covered almonds during games, which is a more unique one, and I don't know where that came from, but now it's just our thing. We eat chocolate-covered almonds during baseball games, and it's a delightful little snack.
Oh, I love that because first of all, it is a good snack. It's got some protein, but it's also kind of desserty. But
Right.
it also has a special memory for you because it's what you ate with your mom.
Exactly. Yeah, and when I go, back to Toronto and watch games with her, she'll always whip out the bag of chocolate almonds.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing in the world. And I can totally get that about the popcorn too, because popcorn, at least it's like low in calories. Because if you're going to sit there and eat for 3 hours, like all stressed out, at least it's popcorn and not, I don't know, chicken wings.
Exactly. I'll try to wait until, the fifth or sixth inning, but that's when the bullpen's in, and that's when my real job starts with, monitoring pitch counts and everything. So that's when the popcorn comes out.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. All right, those were good answers. I like them. They're going to go
I'm
in the
glad. I'm
right
glad.
now. Liz, you have been a tremendous guest. Thank you so much for making the time because I know that you have a million things going on philosophy professor, baseball analyst, and so many people who want a piece of your time. I really appreciate you being here.
This was really fun. I appreciate it. I never thought I would talk about philosophy so much on a baseball podcast, so that was a real treat for me.
It was for me too. I learned a lot. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week when we have another special guest coming. Take care. Bye bye.